Hey, discussion leaders. Hopefully you watched the intro video for this series that's just about 3 minutes long. It's not very long, but introduces you to what we're going to be talking about and how important this series is. And you guys, as discussion leaders, are on the front lines of that, as important as I am for this series, because you're going to be in these vulnerable moments with our students, asking tough questions, hearing what they have to say and responding to that. And so you guys have a really important role both this week and throughout the series as you're assigned this role going forward. Week one of the series, I think it's really important that we set the proper tone for this series, that we show this is really serious, this is really important. And we want to set a tone of just honesty and vulnerability in our groups. We want to encourage our students and even set the example for our students to be honest and vulnerable about this topic, about whether we are confident in our salvation or not, about some of the struggles that we've had in the past, about why we've struggled in the past. Setting that tone this week is super important, so I've got a note for that at the top of your questions for this week. The lesson this week, the first 2 weeks, we're going to be answering the question, what is the nature of saving faith? What is the nature of saving faith? And I'm going to go through 4 layers of salvation. And those 4 layers are believing in Jesus. Salvation is believing in Jesus. It's also trusting in Jesus. It's also receiving Jesus. And it's also treasuring Jesus. Salvation is all of those things, and it must include all of those things in order for it to be real, genuine, saving faith. And so that's where we're going in this series. Week 1, we're going to cover just those first 2 elements. So salvation is believing. We're going to talk about how it's an intellectual belief. You have to believe that Jesus was real, that he lived a perfect life, that he died in our place, and that he rose again. Right? We have to actually believe that that happened. We also have to trust in Jesus. We have to trust in his righteousness over our own in order to be saved. We have to wholly trust that Christ took all of our sin and he gave us all of his perfect righteousness, and that that's what gets us into heaven if we're going to be genuinely saved. So that's what we're going to cover week 1. Those are the 2 probably more well-known layers, the more simple layers, and so I'm not sure how much of it is going to shock our students, but we might be surprised throughout this series what is a surprise and what is new or different to some of our students. So start your conversation just asking, man, what stood out to you guys? Did anything catch you off guard? Did anything surprise you in Andrew's lesson today? Just ask that question, throw it out there, see if there's anything that students really want to focus more on or that they have questions on from the lesson. That will be an important question going forward, but I'd be interested to see what we hear on that week 1. The second question is a huge element of setting this tone of honesty and vulnerability, and a hugely important question for you to pay really close attention to. I want you guys to know who answers question number 2, who's willing to do that, and how do they answer it. This is really important for us to know as leaders. This is a great question for us to hear from our students, and it's an appropriate question for us to ask given the series we're going through. And knowing the information that comes out of question 2 is really going to help us pray for students over this series and in the future, and help us know how to best disciple and reach out to students. So the second question is just inviting students to share their testimony, how they came to Christ, and how things have gone since then. I'm going to set the example for this quickly in my lesson. I'll share a little bit about how I came to faith in Christ and how I struggled mightily with assurance of salvation for a long time after I came to Christ at a young age. So I'll kind of give an example of this, and you're going to invite them into this. You as a leader, come prepared on Sunday to share your own testimony of how you came to Christ and whether you struggled with assurance or understanding salvation after that, or if you felt confident from there on out, why maybe you were, if you were never confident or weren't confident for a long time, why that was. Be ready to share your story, and you may even open up the group by saying, I'm going to ask you guys to do this. Andrew already did it. I'm going to now do that. And then I'm going to ask some of you guys to share. I think it's just important for us to hear one another's stories, and it's helpful for us to hear how other people have had successes or how they've struggled. So come prepared to share your story. Share the details of how you came to know the Lord and how your understanding of salvation maybe has changed over time. Really important question. If you spend the entire time, if students want to continue sharing their story, take the whole discussion time on this. Really important. Please pay attention to what students say in these moments. And if you feel like you get new information or information that's important, talk to me afterwards. I'd love to hear about what comes out of question number 2. Please don't skim over that question. It's really important. Question number 3, if you have time, there's probably more questions on here than you'll have time for. Question number 3 is, why do you think there's so much confusion on the topic of salvation? Why do you think it's so common for teenagers to struggle about whether or not they're saved? I'll share in our lesson that this was the most answered or most checked. We gave the students a survey in the fall of all of the questions we could cover in life groups this semester. One of those questions was, how can I be sure that I'm saved? And that question was the most checked, that people wanted to know the answer to that by far in our survey. 14 out of 20 students said, I want to know, how can I be sure that I'm saved? So you're asking, why is that so common? That didn't surprise me at all. I imagine for many of you leaders, that's not surprising. Very common for teenagers to struggle to know whether or not they're truly saved. And this is just an opinion question. Why do you think that is? How do you think the church, how do you think this youth group can maybe do a better job of that? Just a free, easy question. We're not doing a lot of teaching really in this discussion group. You're trying to create, again, that environment of students being open and honest and learning from one another in our experiences. Again, question 4 and 5, if you get to them, that's great. Don't feel pressured to get to them. Feel free to camp out on question number 2. Question number 4, what are you hoping to gain from this series? What are you hoping to learn? Do you have really specific questions surrounding salvation and baptism that you want answered? That's an open question. Again, if you do get to this question, take notes. If students say, I really want this question answered, we would like to know that. I would like to know that so that I can fold that into the series somehow. And then question number 5 is really reflecting back on the lesson that we just heard. I think most gospel presentations will sound similar to what we present on Sunday. They'll include this element of believing in Jesus and of trusting in Jesus, but they don't go much deeper than that. And you're asking, why do you think that is? Were you surprised that Andrew thinks that there's 2 more layers beyond that are essential to salvation? Do you have any guesses about what the final 2 layers might be? Again, don't feel rushed to get to that question, but it's there for you if you need it and you run through the others quickly. Thank you guys. Again, really excited for this series. Please join me in prayer this week. You guys as discussion leaders, pray specifically over the students in your group. You guys know sometimes where they're at. Many of you, as I've found praying through our roles for D Now and for winter camp, there's a lot of our students, I have no idea whether or not they know the Lord in a saving way yet or not. And so be in prayer for them this week. Be expectant for the Lord to work, even starting week 1 on this kind of simple lesson that we're starting off with. I'm looking forward to partnering with you guys through this series. Thanks.